You've probably spent years beating yourself up about not saving enough. And look, I get it. The balance is lower than you'd like. But here's the thing that genuinely keeps me up at night when I think about retirement math. It's not always how much you saved that determines whether your money runs out. Research by Michael Kitces found that the correlation between your very first year of retirement returns and your 30-year sustainable withdrawal rate is only 0.21, basically noise. But the correlation between the first 10 years of real returns and that same withdrawal rate, it's 0.79. That means roughly 60% of whether your retirement works or doesn't is explained by when you retire and what the market does in those early years, not the balance on the day you stop working. That's a genuinely uncomfortable idea. And if you're in your 50s right now, you're sitting right in the window where this either protects you or blindsides you. So let me explain exactly what's happening here, because once you see the mechanism, it stops being scary and starts being something you can actually plan around. Sequence of returns risk is the name for a specific problem that doesn't exist while you're still saving. When you're in accumulation mode, putting money in every paycheck, a market crash in year 3 actually helps you. You're buying more shares at lower prices. Dollar cost averaging works in your favor. But the moment you flip that switch and start taking money out, the math runs in reverse. Now, a bad year in year 3 means you're selling shares at lower prices to cover your expenses. Those shares are gone. They can't recover with the market. And the portfolio you're pulling from is permanently smaller going forward. Here's a simple way I explain it at the kitchen table. Imagine 2 people. Both retire with $500,000. Both average exactly 7% returns over 20 years. Person A gets bad years early, down 25% in year 1, down 15% in year 2, then strong returns after that. Person B gets those same bad years at the end of the 20-year period instead. Same average return, completely different outcome. Person A runs out of money well before year 20. Person B is fine. The sequence, the order of those returns, is what determines survival, not the average. Schwab's research on bear markets since the 1960s found the average peak-to-peak recovery time for a diversified stock index has been about 3.5 years, 3.5 years. That sounds manageable until you're pulling 4%, 5%, 6% out of the portfolio every single one of those years while you wait for it to recover. Every withdrawal at a depressed price is a permanent haircut. The shares don't come back. The money does not come back. Now let's talk about where the research has landed on safe withdrawal rates, because I think a lot of people are still operating on advice that's at least a decade out of date. The 4% rule, the idea that you can withdraw 4% of your portfolio in year 1 and adjust for inflation every year after, comes from research done in the 1990s by William Bengen. It held up reasonably well for a long time. But Morningstar's 2025 State of Retirement Income Report, published December 2025, puts the base case safe starting withdrawal rate at 3.9% for a new retiree planning a 30-year horizon with a 90% probability of success. That's up slightly from 3.7% in their 2024 report. And yes, the improvement is real, but it's still below 4%. More importantly, Morningstar's Monte Carlo simulations found that retirees who started at a 4% withdrawal rate back in 2022, right as the market dropped and bonds got crushed simultaneously, had only a 72.3% chance of their money lasting 30 years. Compare that to someone who started at 3.3%. Their probability of success was 91.8%, nearly 20 percentage points of difference. Same savings, same investment mix. The only difference was timing and withdrawal rate. My take on the 4% rule, it's a useful starting framework, but treating it like a guarantee will get people hurt. The data is clear. And what Morningstar found about the equity allocation piece is something that genuinely surprised me when I first read it. And I think it's going to surprise you too. There's a widespread belief, especially among late starters who feel like they need to swing for the fences, that you should hold more stocks near retirement to make up for lost ground. Honestly, I used to lean that direction myself. The logic feels right. More stocks, more growth, close the gap. But Morningstar's research shows that the highest safe withdrawal rates in retirement actually occur with an equity weighting of just 30% to 50%. Go above 50% in stocks, and the safe withdrawal rate starts to fall, not rise, because the added volatility creates more sequence risk than the added expected return can offset. I think most advisors who push late starters toward an aggressive equity allocation near retirement have this backwards. The math does not support it. Your specific allocation still depends on your timeline, your other income sources, your health, your willingness to adjust spending. But the default recommendation from the evidence is a moderate allocation, not an aggressive one, heading into and through the early retirement years. Now here's where it gets particularly sharp for people who started late. The Federal Reserve's Survey of Consumer Finances, the 2022 edition, which is still the most recent full survey, found the median retirement savings for Americans aged 55 to 64 is $185,000. The mean is $537,560, but that number is pulled up by a small number of very high balance households. The median is what most people actually have. $185,000. Vanguard's How America Saves 2026 report found the average 401k balance at year-end 2025 was $167,970, with a median of just $44,115. Those are active participants, people still contributing. So when sequence of returns modeling is built on assumptions of $500,000 or $750,000 or $1 million, it's not describing the median American. It's describing the top tier. If you're sitting at $185,000 and you retire at 62, a 3.9% withdrawal rate gives you $7,215 a year. That's $601 a month from your portfolio. Now, Social Security and any pension you have fill in above that, but the portfolio buffer is thin, and thin buffers are exactly where sequence risk does the most damage. A 25% drawdown in year one of retirement on a $185,000 portfolio leaves you with roughly $138,750 before you've even taken a withdrawal that year. That's not a math problem you can dollar cost average your way out of. I work with people 50 and over who are planning their retirement, and the ones who navigate this well aren't necessarily the ones who saved the most. They're the ones who understood what was coming in the 5 years before and the 5 years after retirement, what researchers call the retirement red zone, and did something about it. So what do you actually do? There are 3 moves worth understanding here, and they work together. The first is building what Schwab calls a sequence risk buffer, essentially 2 to 4 years of living expenses held in cash, short-term CDs, or short-term treasury bonds, completely separate from your investment portfolio. The logic is straightforward. If the market drops 30% in year 2 of retirement, you pull your living expenses from the buffer instead of selling depressed equities. You give the portfolio time to recover. And remember, Schwab's data says the average bear market takes about 3.5 years to fully recover without locking in permanent losses through forced sales. The buffer doesn't need to earn much. Its job is to exist. 2 to 4 years of expenses sitting in something stable is worth more than the yield you'd get chasing returns with it. The second move is worth running the numbers on carefully, because the dollar figures here are striking. Morningstar's research also found that a flexible withdrawal strategy using what they call a guardrails approach, where you pull back spending when the portfolio drops below a trigger point and give yourself a raise when it recovers, can support a starting withdrawal rate of up to 5.2% on a 40-60 portfolio. That's meaningfully higher than the 3.9% base case. The trade-off is that your ending balance is lower. Morningstar's model shows a median ending balance of around $230,000 using that approach. Whether that trade-off makes sense depends heavily on whether you have heirs you want to leave money to or whether your goal is income sustainability for yourself. There's no universal right answer there. But the point is that the withdrawal rate isn't fixed. It's a lever you can actually adjust based on market conditions, which removes some of the sequence risk by design. The third move is one that almost no one talks about in the context of sequence risk, and it's genuinely one of the most powerful tools a late starter has: Social Security timing. Here's what I'd do if I were 60 years old and working through this math. I would think of Social Security delay not as a bet on how long I'll live, but as a hedge against sequence of returns risk. Here's why that framing matters. The 2026 maximum monthly Social Security benefit at age 62 is $2,969. At full retirement age, which is now $67 for anyone born in 1960 or later, it's $4,207. At 70, it's $5,181. That's a difference of $2,212 a month between claiming at 62 and claiming at 70, over $26,500 a year. And that number is inflation-adjusted, guaranteed, and doesn't care what the stock market is doing. When you delay Social Security, you're buying a guaranteed income floor. Every year you delay from 62 to 70, the SSA credits you with delayed retirement credits of roughly 8% per year. So from a purely actuarial standpoint, the break-even age between claiming at 62 versus 70 falls in the early to mid-80s, and the average life expectancy for a 65-year-old American today already sits past that point. But more importantly for sequence risk, the higher your guaranteed monthly Social Security income, the smaller the withdrawal you need to take from your portfolio in the early retirement years. And smaller withdrawals in bad years mean far less damage from sequence risk. The portfolio gets more time to breathe. The flip side of this is that if you claim early, and I see this constantly, people claiming at 62 out of fear that they won't live long enough, or because the balance is low and they feel like they need the money, you're locking in a permanently reduced benefit and you're pulling more from the portfolio in those critical early years. You've made the sequence of returns problem worse on both fronts simultaneously. Now, the Social Security earnings test matters here if you're still working. In 2026, if you claim before your full retirement age and you're still earning income, the SSA withholds $1 for every $2 you earn above $24,480. That threshold rises to $65,160 in the year you reach FRA. After FRA, the earnings test disappears entirely. If you're planning to work part-time into your late 60s, that changes the math on optimal claiming age for your specific situation. One more lever that's genuinely underused among late starters. The Secure 2.0 Act created what's called a super catch-up contribution for workers ages 60 through 63. In 2020, workers in that age window can contribute up to $35,750 to a 401k. That's the standard $24,500 deferral limit plus the $11,250 super catch-up. Add an IRA contribution of $7,500 on top of that, and you're looking at potentially $43,250 a year in tax-advantaged retirement savings. 4 years of maxing that out, ages 60, 61, 62, 63, adds up to $173,000 in additional contributions before you retire. That's not nothing. That materially changes the sequence of returns math because a larger portfolio absorbs the same dollar amount withdrawal as a smaller percentage, which is exactly what lowers your sequence risk exposure. If you can't shelter $43,250 a year because the income isn't there, and for a lot of people it's genuinely not, even partial use of that window helps. Any reduction in your withdrawal percentage in the early retirement years is a direct reduction in sequence risk. Also worth knowing, a 30-year TIPS ladder, Treasury Inflation-Protected Securities, can currently support an inflation-adjusted starting withdrawal rate of 4.5%, according to Morningstar's data as of September 2025. That's actually higher than the 3.9% portfolio-based rate because TIPS eliminate both market risk and inflation risk entirely. They're not for everyone. They sacrifice the upside of equities, and they require a certain portfolio size to ladder properly. But for someone who wants a predictable income floor without sequence risk, they're worth understanding. Let me put all of this together in plain terms because I don't want to leave you with a pile of percentages and nowhere to stand. The Federal Reserve found that only 35% of non-retired adults felt on track for retirement in 2024. That number is probably close to where you are if you're watching this. And I'm not going to pretend the math is always easy, but sequence of returns risk is manageable. You do it with a cash buffer of 2 to 4 years of expenses. You do it by keeping your equity allocation at 30% to 50% in retirement, not 80%, so the volatility doesn't gut you in a bad early stretch. You do it by thinking hard about Social Security timing as longevity insurance, not a break-even bet. And if you're between 60 and 63, you use that Secure 2.0 super catch-up window like your retirement depends on it, because it might. It is almost never too late to fix the math, but you have to understand what you're actually protecting against. I'm not a licensed financial advisor. This is general education, not personalized advice. Consult a fiduciary before acting. If you found this useful, subscribe. There's more coming that builds directly on what we just covered. Next week, we're tackling a question I hear constantly from people in their 50s. Is a 25% to 30% savings rate actually realistic on a normal salary? And what does the math look like if you're starting that push right now? That one's worth sticking around for. And before the affiliate link below, if there's a specific retirement question you want me to dig into, drop it in the comments. I read every one, and I'll work the best ones into upcoming videos. This video may contain affiliate links. I only recommend tools I use personally.